On the eve of the Second World War, Germany possessed a large, complex machinery of dozens of agencies responsible for gathering and analyzing intelligence. And while this complex, even the military intelligence component of the interwar and wartime years isn't quite the field in search of scholars anymore, there is a noticeable discrepancy in the treatment of individual elements. And one element that remains largely unknown is that of naval intelligence. There are disparate references, often contradictory, within both the intelligence and naval historiographies. But the sum total conclusion is often basically the Navy is not interested. And the wartime performance of naval intelligence was highly divergent. Signal intelligence, the Wehrdienst, was very good, one of the most successful organizations, whereas the Abwehrs 1M, the human intelligence component, was one of the least effective and corrupt. And charting out the between these two is a little bit the object here. There is a historiographical context. After 1945, naval officers hardly addressed intelligence aspects. Intelligence is seen as synonymous with espionage and political activity, both areas that the Navy sought to distance itself from to portray itself as an apolitical entity. And when German naval officers recalled about intelligence, they tended to compartmentalize in terms of specific sources or instances, and a pattern of signals intelligence technical gathering is good, whereas covert espionage is bad, is also evident. It's also interesting in this context to note that Theodor Abs, the head of the Marine Nachrichtendienst in the 1930s, in his attempt to outline the increasing scope of his department's activities, adopts the English term intelligence to describe his work, as it encompasses this dual aspect of information in conjunction with analysis. Ulrich Liss at Fremde Heere West also does the same. The disdain expressed concerning espionage is wrapped up in the role of Admiral Canaris in the events of 1944, and it may be observed in the recollections from the very top downwards. Reda and Dönitz, after the war, referred to the Canarische Abwehr of having done nothing, outright ignoring one of its significant successes. But Canaris is not the focal point in terms of naval intelligence specifically. The additional fact that intelligence didn't seem to have any grand coups is something that also causes a lack of focus or lack of attention to it, despite the fact that the sum total of intelligence is a lot of small details rather than a big event. Understanding what the naval intelligence requirements are is important too. The geopolitical developments are interesting to the Navy, those affecting the maritime domain, development in foreign naval programs, as these have long lead times and involve significant financial investment, and the ability to correct mistakes is limited. New innovations and their potential impact, this is an era of significant change in terms of aviation, sensors, etc., and how foreign navies intended to operate in wartime. Ultimately, I would argue this is the most important. And the requirements manifest themselves in wide-ranging interests, gathering at all and for all levels of war, and all source collections. All navies share these interests, but what makes intelligence more important in the German case is the naval weakness in the interwar years, both in qualitative and quantitative terms too. Well, you see certain trends across these 2 decades. There is a centralization in the coordination and analysis of intelligence, greater control by the central authority, and a genuine attempt to reduce duplication of effort in face of finite resources. There is a protection of components deemed vital and an abandonment or a trading off of those not. A focus on specific naval interests becomes evident, be they strategic, operational, technical, and an increased production and dissemination of products throughout the whole organization. This isn't the guarantee that everything is being read or acted upon, but the prevalence and access to information noticeably increases over time. And I'll split the organizational development into 3 phases. The first phase, 1919 to 28, objectively it's very modest, but this wide-ranging activity is in a continuation of an imperial naval intelligence culture. The Navy picks up intelligence work within months of the First World War ending, but is faced really with a couple of fundamental problems apart from the lack of resources and personnel. The Auswärtiges Amt bars the Navy from appointing naval attaches on the basis of the Navy's previous conduct and the tendency to scandal. And this is a significant problem and fuels the Navy's recourse to more unofficial means. Signals intelligence, the value of which had been demonstrated in the First World War, is reestablished very quickly. The Wehrdienst is reestablished on a small but basis within months of the war ending too. And the Navy, despite resource constraints, understands that the ability to operate in wartime was dependent on maintaining a cryptographic and technical expertise, which in turn required long service experienced personnel. There's a lesson learned here. Secret intelligence, and secret is relative here, is seen as one of the strengths of the Navy, though I think what we know from the archival record is it is quite limited. This is predominantly run by ex-naval officers, work as journalists or businessmen. It's composed of an official Marine Erkundungsdienst, a wider information gathering network referred to as the Weltnachrichtendienst, the activities of Captain Lohmann's industrial intelligence complex, and wider cooperation with news agencies. There is a lot of overlap between these, but it's seen as the Navy's doing something while the Army isn't. Within the naval staff, intelligence is coordinated by numerous desks: analytical, secret intelligence, counterintelligence, but crucially, other areas, nascent aviation, submarine, and naval construction departments also collect intelligence. It's very decentralized. The second phase, 28 to 32, these are important transitionary years and the survival of an independent naval intelligence complex. The process of creating the wider Abwehr in April 28 is generally well known. From a position of weakness over the Lohmann affair and the Panzerschiff program, domestic politics around that, the Navy is forced to hand over its secret intelligence component, which becomes Abwehr 5, and counterintelligence. But it keeps the Wehrdienst. And friction between the Marineleitung and the Abwehr continue throughout 28 and 29, essentially because the Navy uses its assets independently of the Abwehr and is causing numerous problems. And partly it does so as an agreement to reinstate attaches that not materialize. The Auswärtiges Amt increasingly is concerned by clandestine naval activities, and eventually, over an issue in Spain, the Marineleitung is forced to give up independent gathering and divests itself of this previous era's activity. There are administrative issues within the Abwehr itself, leading to the appointment of Konrad Patzig, who eventually takes over the Abwehr. And eventually this paves the way for Canaris. Crucially, though, the Wehrdienst is moved out of the firing line to Kiel, and this is often portrayed as a cost-cutting measure, but it also keeps it within the naval realm. And it's only in 1932, after intense lobbying of the new von Papen government, that naval attaches or military attaches are reinstated, and the Navy had specifically argued it could no longer undertake its reconstruction without foreign intelligence information, or information, not necessarily of an intelligent nature. The last phase, phase 3, 33 to 39, this is an expansion for wartime strategic operational needs and a ring fencing of sorts from the wider intelligence structures that develop under the Third Reich. 1933 sees the creation of a single intelligence department, the Marine Nachrichtendienst, which has the dual role of assembling and analyzing all incoming intelligence and communications of the Navy. The sub-department, the Gruppe Fremde Marine, is the central point and repository to avoid this duplication that occurred in the imperial era and during the 1920s. Naval control of its attaches is very different in the 30s to prior to 1914. They report directly to the Chef de Marineleitung, Admiral Reda, and are kept separate from the Army and Naval and Luftwaffe attaches. They also provide a reasonably objective reporting and do not act as conduits of a special foreign policy. Attaches were not supposed to conduct clandestine gathering, but there is certainly a two-tier system in operation between the attaches to the core naval powers and those on the periphery. The Wehrdienst is brought back into the center of naval intelligence, where it is nurtured and given substantial resources, which results in it being the best signals intelligence outfit by 1939. This contrasts with the human intelligence work at Abwehr 5, which then becomes 1M, which for several years was not allowed to work against certain targets. The continued rivalry between the Marineleitung and the Abwehr over control of elements, and the Abwehr under Canaris and Leopold Bürgner, who's also a naval officer who runs the Ausland. There is this tension between naval officers within two organizations. And the administrative squabble over the newly re-established Etappendienst, a clandestine logistical support organization, shows some of these internal dynamics. It's established as a second naval section of the Abwehr, uses the old structures of the Weltnachrichtendienst. But as the Navy staff starts to show more interest in developing operational plans for the Atlantic theater, it wants control and effectively prizes it out of the Abwehr by 1939. Drawing some wider conclusions, both domestically and internationally, the Navy seems to have been very reluctant to go into any cooperation. Anything that was absolutely important to it, it wanted under its own control and not to be dependent on others, be they foreign navies, be they other agencies within Germany. And having a central signals intelligence agency, which is often seen as the measure to prevent compromise of Enigma then during the war, would have hindered the quality of operational intelligence that the fleet could be furnished with. Within the role of signals intelligence and clandestine overseas supplies as being core interests, they were crucial to Atlantic operations as the Navy planned against France in the 30s and later Britain. And it's easy to understand why the Navy chose to isolate itself from any closer form of cooperation. The reality was also there was little common ground in the 1930s for cooperation. The Army and Navy had different interests, even in terms of signals intelligence, but where there was profitable cooperation to be had, and the area that comes to mind is pre-war aerial reconnaissance, where Army, Navy, and Air Force do seem to have cooperated to a great degree. This was done. The approach on focusing naval requirements did harbor long-term problems, such as the inability to access or to assess threats to German communication security, or in terms of developing scientific intelligence along the British lines, as would happen to come in the Second World War itself. But when we compare the situation that naval intelligence is in, the organization is in 1939 to where it had been in 1914, it was a much more effective, streamlined, and focused entity. That's me.